Thanks for tuning in at Brackies. Hello everyone and welcome to video number 9 in the How to Program in C# course. In today's video we're going to have a look at storing multiple pieces of data at once using a container. So there are many different types of containers that allows you to do this. And the most basic one, the one we're going to be looking at first, is what is called an array. So arrays are basically lists of items where you know beforehand how many elements are going to be in the list. So we cannot change the amount of elements. Then there's another type of container called lists. And yeah, it's weird that arrays basically are lists in real life and lists are also lists, but bear with me here. And lists is basically something we use when we don't know how many elements we're going to need. So you can add and remove to the list as you go. And when we're done with all that, hopefully we'll have time to look into two-dimensional arrays or jagged arrays, as they're also called, but those are just a bit different. Okay, so let's dig right into it. As always, if you have any questions or you find something confusing, head over to forum.brackies.com, where I am, among many others, are ready to answer your questions. It's very fun. Awesome. So let's open up Xamarin Studios and we're going to have a look at arrays. Woo! So first off, we're going to type the type of element and the variable type, the data type of the elements that are going to be stored in the array. So let's start out by making an array of integers. And to make sure that the machine knows we are going to be creating an array, we type an open square bracket and a close square bracket. These are pretty much symbolic of arrays in C#. Then we type the name of the array, just like any other variable. And we're going to simply do numbers. Then we set it equal to something. And what we're going to equal it to is a new int array and then a semicolon. This new keyword here is something we use each time we spawn or create a piece of data. And that's what we're doing here. But however, when we're creating arrays, it needs to know how large it should be. How many numbers can this array hold? So we give it just that information by typing in a number inside these two square brackets. And we're gonna type in, let's say we want 5 numbers. Cool. So how do we access these numbers and how do we set them equal to something? Well, it's actually really easy. We simply do numbers sub, let's say 0. Arrays are 0 based, so if you want to access the first element, you type in 0, 1 for the second, 2 for the third, and then you just go. So we're gonna set the first element in the numbers array equal to, let's say, 12. Then we're gonna have numbers array 1 sub 1 be equal to 3. Numbers sub 2 equal to 5. And we can just go on here. But I'm just gonna leave the rest of them and they will default to 0. So if we want to write out a piece of data to the screen from this array, we simply do console.writeLine. And then we can access it very easily by doing numbers. And then let's say we want to pick the second element. So we're going to do 1. And then close off the square brackets there. So numbers sub 1. And that's going to write out 3. So now when we hit play, what it's basically doing behind the scenes is it's creating a new array that can host up to, or that will host 5 numbers. And then it's setting the first one to 12, the second one to 3, and the third one to 5. And then it's printing out the second one, which is 3. Awesome. So, but let's say we want to write out all of the numbers we have in our array. So now we've looked at creating arrays, at getting and setting values, but now we need to loop through our array. And that's actually really easily done using a for loop. So we'll just write for int I equals 0, I is less than, and then what we're going to do here, before we've just written a fixed number, let's say 10, we want to loop through something 10 times, and we could just write 5 here, But even better, we can access the length of our array. So we can do numbers.length like this, and then do I++ because we want to increment it each time. I'm going to try and force Xamarin Studio to do this because I think it's easier for you to read. Cool. So one thing I quickly want to mention also is we could have an integer up here called, let's say, amount of numbers, and set that equal to 5. And then in here we could put amount of numbers. That's totally legitimate if you want to do that. Just so you know. Cool. So inside of this for loop, we'll now write console.write. And inside of this, we'll do numbers and then I. So basically what is going on here is we are creating this array and populating it. Then we are doing a for loop that will set create a variable called I, set it equal to 0. Then it will loop through and increment I each time, and it will keep doing that until we reach the end of our array. And then what we are actually doing is we are writing out the number at the ith position. So the cool thing about this is if we just make this easier to read by doing comma space like that, is that it will automatically print out the different numbers in our array, which is 12, 3, 5, and then 2 default zeros. Awesome. Another way to loop through an array is with what is called a for each loop. And this is very popular, especially among beginners, because it's much easier to remember syntax-wise. There are some differences performance-wise between a for and a for each loop, but I don't think at this level that it's something you need to worry about yet, because it's not as simple as for is always faster or for each. It really depends on what you're doing with your for loop. But you simply do for each, and then you say int number in numbers, and then open up the brackets. I'm gonna put them down here. And then in here we can write out console.write, and then we simply say number plus, and then do the same here. Like that. So this looks much easier, and really it is. Basically what we're saying is that for each integer in our numbers array, we'll create an int called number, and we can then use that number down here. So we're basically making a variable here that is that element. So that's super cool. And one thing you will notice is that if we change number in here, so let's say we set number equal to 5, this will set all of the elements equal to 5, and then we print out console.writeLine. We'll just make one empty line, and then below it we'll write out, let's say numbers sub, let's say 1 or 2. Let's do 1. And if we hit play here, it will say that we cannot assign to number because it is a for each iteration variable. And what does that mean? I mean, this has confused me from the beginning, and a lot of other beginners too. And basically what is wrong here is that inside of this for each statement, we are basically creating a clone of each element and calling it number. So when we try to change number, we are not actually changing the elements in the array, but we are trying to change this forced variable. And that cannot happen. So we're basically doing something we cannot. So for each statements are awesome if we don't need to change things in the array using them. You can do so using some trickery, but really they're awesome for just accessing stuff. Cool. So now that you know that, we are going to comment that out and have a look at the next thing in our array. Yeah, before we move on to lists, I quickly want to show you that instead of writing this out each time you want to set a number, you can do this much easier. And now we're going to create a string array. You can use strings or integers or floats or any data type for the array. So we're going to create a string array, and we're going to say we want 3 strings, and we're going to call it names. And instead of doing names sub 0 equals and so on, what we can do is, instead of that semicolon, we can open up some brackets. And in here, we can type first name, which is going to be Tom. Then we're going to have a Mark and a Matt, like that. And then remember, at the end here, after the second curly bracket, the close curly bracket, you will put in a semicolon or it will not work. So the cool thing about this is that it's very, very easy to populate our array. And if we just want to print this out, we can use our for each statement again. Just change this to string, change this to name, change this to names, and that to name. And now when we hit play, it's going to print out Tom, Mark, and Matt. So that's super cool. Great. So now we're going to move on to lists. So we're going to comment out our for each once again, and we're going to delete this, and we're going to delete the arrays, woohoo, because now we are doing lists. Awesome. So lists are basically function as basically the same as arrays, just with a tiny bit of different syntax. And really, you should only use lists when you don't know beforehand how many elements are going to be in them. Because if you can use an array is generally going to be faster. And they can be quite a bit faster. So now that you know that, I'm going to show you how to use them. So firstly, in order to use a list, you're going to have up here to include it. So we're going to type using system.collections.generic. Don't ask me why we have to type exactly this yet, but basically what we're doing is we're saying we want to import a bunch of functionality that is in this collection generic namespace. So we are basically importing a bunch of stuff. That is really common and really useful. Now we can then type list, and then we're going to do these less than and greater than signs. And inside of them, we'll give it the data type. So that's going to be of type integer. Whoops. And we're going to call this again just numbers. And we're going to set it equal to a new list, again of type int here. And then remember a open parentheses and a close one. That's the syntax for creating a new list. So it's a bit different, but the cool thing here is that we can then go numbers. This is going to be empty by default, by the way. We can then go numbers.add, and then we can just give it an item here. So we're going to add, let's say 13, numbers.add. We can add maybe a 4, and you can do this as long as you want to. So we're going to add 3 numbers here. And we're going to do an 8. Then if you want to access it, just like a normal array, you would do console.writeLine. And basically, by the way, an easier way to do console.writeLine if you're typing really quickly is just to do CV and then tab. I just wanted to show you that. It's pretty cool. Then we can write out numbers and then access by doing this sub again here. So we are accessing, let's say, the second element. And now when we hit play here or run, it's going to print out 4. So you can do that. So when actually dealing with a list, it's the same syntax as an array. So that's kind of nice. Okay, so now that we know that, how do we remove from an array? Well, it's actually pretty easy again. So let's add 3 numbers. Let's loop through using our for statement. And remember, when you are using lists, don't use .length. Now use .count. It's a pitfall so many people fall into and get annoyed. Why isn't my code running and all that? You need to change it. Don't ask me why. Cool. And then what we can do down here is we can do console.writeLine, just make an empty line there. And then we can remove, or do numbers, dot remove at, and then you give it an index. So you give it a location you want to remove from. And let's say we want to remove the second. So we're going to remove at 2. I'm pretty sure that's not 0 based, but we'll find out here. So we'll do 4 int I and then print it all out again. So let's hit play here, and it's going to print out 13, 4, and 8, and it is actually 0 based. So we're going to remove at 1. There we go. So we've removed the middle number. So we print out 13, 4, and 8. We add those, print them out, create a new line, remove at the 1th position, which is the 4, and then print them out again. Cool. You can also, let me see here, dot remove. You can also remove by inserting kind of what element it should search for. So if we want to remove the 4 by typing in 4 here, it will do so. Just remember that it will remove the first element that matches its search parameter, and then just leave the rest. So that's kind of, yeah, just keep that in mind. Generally, it's much better if you know the index. Awesome. So that was lists and how to use them. At last, we're going to look at something pretty cool, which is the two-dimensional or multi-dimensional array. So, multi-dimensional arrays. These are very awesome for a bunch of things. You use them quite a lot when constructing games. For certain. So let's create a new function here, and we're going to call this create grid. Let's say we want to make a grid of numbers that could be used for a map. It could be used for some data modeling. It could be used for all kinds of stuff. And we want to print out this grid when we've created it. So let's call the create grid function here. And yeah. Awesome. So first off, we need to declare the multi-dimensional array. And it's actually really easy. You just go int, open square bracket, and then comma, close square bracket. Now it knows that we want a two-dimensional. For a three-dimensional, you do comma, comma, and so on. Then we can type, let's just call this grid. And we're going to equal it to a new multi-dimensional array, and of course we need to give it a size, so we're going to do a 5 by 5 grid. Then down here we can of course populate it with data if we want to. I'm going to do so using we could do so using a for statement, but instead let's just try and print it out, because of course if you want to populate a number here, we can do one quickly. Let's say we want to change the second row and the third position. We could do like that and then simply equal it to, let's say, 5 or 3 maybe. That's up to you. And then we can print it out using 2 for loops. So let's first create for int, and then we could do x equals 0, because we're going to have an x and a y here, as long as x is less than grid dot. And in here, if you don't want to do just length, because that's going to get you the total number of elements in all of the array's dimensions. Instead, you can do get length, and then you can give it the dimension that you want to search for. Or you could just, and this is what you're going to be doing most of the time, create 2 variables up here, one called int width. We're going to set that equal to 5, and another one called int height, which we're also going to equal to 5. And then instead of 5 here, we type width and height. And then down here, as long as x is less than width, x plus plus, to increment it, open up the brackets. Oh, it's so annoying that Xamarin Studio does that. And then for int, I know you can change it by the way, I'm just too lazy. So 0, y is less than height, y plus plus, and whoops. My keyboard's spacing out here, but we'll get it working. So I think this is the first time that we've done a for loop within a for loop. And basically for each iteration of x, it's going to do y iterations here. So for each element in one direction, it's going to loop through the height amount. And then we can simply access each parameter by doing console.write. And we are going to write out the grid at the x, y-th position. And then we're going to do a space between them also. So, nicely done. Now we can hit play. And whoops, of course, we need to also create a new line for each time we've looped through one iteration on the x. So we're going to do console.writeLine down here. And now we should see a grid created. Indeed, we have. And this is basically the foundation of creating maps and such in games. You're going to use it all the time. So that's super, super cool. And this is the kind of the easy way to make a Minecraft clone. It all starts with this. Cool. And of course we can now increase this to whatever magnitude that we would like. We could do a 20 by 20, and I think I'm going to remove the space here. And we could also delete this. There's no reason for that to be there. And we can hit play, and you can see it will create these huge grids for us. And we can of course also assign to it as we go along. So we can say grid here is going to be grid x, y is going to be equal to x times y, for example. And you can see what that does. Whoops, now we are starting to need spaces. Maybe we should just do x plus y and then do a space in here. It's a fun way to play around with mathematics because you can get these cool looking shapes like this. Awesome. So that was an introduction to kind of arrays and what you can do with them, two-dimensional arrays, how to construct grids, lists, all that, the kind of very accessible containers that you might encounter. And the last thing I want to just mention is there's another way of creating multi-dimensional arrays, which is called jagged arrays. And the syntax is just a bit different. Instead of doing int, one thing, another thing, you just do two brackets, and this is basically an array of an array. And you can of course call this grid also and equal to a new int array of array, and then do width, height, and everything from here is pretty self-explanatory. I just wanted to mention that this is another way of writing the code, and again, when you should use one or another really depends on the situation. It's not gonna make a big difference for the kind of applications that we are writing here, but you can of course look it up and read about it if you are very interested in making your application very performant. So I just quickly wanted to show you that that's another way. Cool. So that was basically all for containers, for arrays and lists in C#. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.